I just want everyone to know, I thought the title of this book was Angel of Repose and not Angle of Repose. Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel, Read Good, Draw Bad, where we love to read really, really good and draw pretty darn bad. I am in a new space, so if things sound a little different, I'm still adjusting, so you might see some changes around here. I'm enjoying the new space, even though it's a little different, so hopefully you will still enjoy these videos. Today we will be reading about engineering, and if you're an engineer, that will probably make you happy. Sorry to say there's no math involved in this review. But if you're someone like me who loves to read books, the good news is no math is required to enjoy this book. Instead, we will be reading the haunting love story of a couple in the Wild West as retold by their grandson, a retired historian, Lyman Ward. And you can find a compelling tale about how the West was built in this book, The Angle of Repose by Wallace Stegner, not The Angel of Repose. Just so you know, I'm doing a reading challenge where I'm reading the Modern Library's top 100 novels of the 20th century as decided by the Modern Library. You can find more information in the description below. First, a TLDR on this book. When you first start reading this book, you would not know that this is a love story. And that's because when we first meet Lyman Ward, he is bound to his wheelchair on top of a mountain and in requirement of a very serious caretaker. His wife has just left him and he is very mad. Along with his obsession with his wife who is now left, he is also obsessed with putting together the records of a real love story, the love story of his grandparents who raised him. And he takes care of all of these details as we watch him try and piece together their history, which was very complicated as they went from place to place, while he is being taken care of as someone who with very severe disabilities as an older person. So he's helped by a young girl, a family friend of theirs, who helps him with his day-to-day daily needs. Good news is that we can, for the most part, ignore this cranky old historian and focus on two very powerful individuals, creative, passionate, and in their own ways, very brilliant individuals who help shape what the West would become and help create some of the modern ideas in the United States as we know them. To be clear, this book is about two people. We follow Susan Burling, who is also a successful, creative, and brilliant artist, as she falls in love with Oliver Ward, a talented and hardworking engineer just at the start of his career. And the two of them, by chance, fall in love at a party. And this happenstance chance meeting of them at a party changes the trajectory of both of their lives. And as this is a modern book, this means that she leaves her rich friends and her best friend Augusta and moves from New York to literally the middle of nowhere, but out in what was considered at the time the Wild West, which is obviously very far away from New York. The whole point of the book, and the whole reason people move to the backwater of American civilization, is to do what engineers do best, which is to build more civilization. Part of Olivia's story is her deep and enduring friendship with her best friend Augusta and Augusta's husband, Thomas Hudson. And we follow their journey as their lives change and their personalities change over time as the New York socialite Augusta lives her life and Susan Burling Ward lives her slightly more frontier of the West oriented life. And these two keep up as part of a series of letters, so we spent a lot of time reading through the letters of best friends as time changes and their needs change. Susan is often trying to balance the life of being a good wife to her husband who needs her for just to get through most things throughout the day because they didn't have modern conveniences like dishwashers or clothing washers or anything of the sort, and balancing her personal desires and ambitions since she gave up her career to be with Oliver and start a family. Throughout the book, as Oliver's job site changes, as his projects change, and as his career experience grows, with Susan supporting him, we see the different kind of various livable and unlivable places that both of them inhabit, trying to make the best of their lives. They are definitely living in what would be considered a man's world, while Susan is trying to make the best of it, given that she's given up her career and is trying to start a family in a place that's not really oriented towards family living. She doesn't have a huge support network, and she's often surrounded by just working men. A big theme in the book is how everyone is expecting, as part of the Wild West, for Oliver, a talented young man, to strike it rich so that they can live somewhat a part of the American dream. Susan can go back to her family and back to her friends and spend time with them, valuable time, to be with them in livable modern society and not just somewhere in the back of a field somewhere. Now, we can follow the journey of this couple through several major locations. First is Leadville, Colorado, a booming mining town. The conditions are very harsh and the high altitudes make for some very difficult living circumstances for the both of them. Second is in New Almaden, California. Oliver takes the position at the New Almaden Quicksilver mine, and he grows there in managerial and leadership experience as he becomes a more proficient engineer. We learn all about the technical and managerial aspects of managing a mine, which to some people could be very fascinating. From there, we move to Boise Canyon, Idaho. This is one of the pivotal parts of the book where Oliver works on an extremely ambitious project that could be his strike-rich moment of the book. An ambitious engineering project which is meant to bring water to arid lands, which reflects in the book Oliver's innovative spirit and entrepreneurship and his way of thinking that is just so integral to how to shape a good place to live for other people. This project is a testament to Oliver's desire, which is not always spoken about in the book, about his desire to bring good technology to everyday people to improve and enhance their lives. Later in the novel, Oliver and Susan move to Grass Valley, California, where Oliver works on another mining project. This location is significant because it's where they spend their later years, and it's also where Lyman grows up. But they don't move back to Grass Valley until later. So they're in Grass Valley, then they leave. Then they come back. In one of their final relocations, Oliver takes them to Michoacan, Mexico. And money is very tight at this time, so Oliver, in a strike of desperation, moves his entire small family to Mexico, which actually ends up being, for Susan, a renaissance period for her art. There she meets different kinds of people and interacts with different kinds of culture she didn't expect, different kinds of architecture, and it grows her artistic abilities as well as challenges her as an artist, and she ends up becoming a prolific artist of what the Wild West was at the time for major New York magazines and other publications. And here it is that Susan finally finds the adventure that she personally was looking for. Here's a quote from the novel. "The conventions of her time and place never inhibited her, I think, because it never occurred to her to rebel against them. But the ambitions that gave her purpose and the talents that helped fill a life not otherwise satisfying, she never fully realized or developed. She could infuse with her own special emotion anything she could draw, but she could draw only what she had seen. Mexico was indeed her Paris and her Rome, her grand tour, her only glimpse of the ancient and exotic civilizations." And here, in my opinion, is where the book really starts to take off and the payoff happens, because we have someone who you feel her tense emotions throughout the entire book of just trying to make it, whether the problem is money or childbirth or difficult living conditions. And finally, they arrive in a place where there's a bit of civilization and there's a bit of inspiration for Susan to really develop herself as an artist. It's very enjoyable because from this point on, we see both Oliver and Susan start to become the kind of people they were meant to be in Mexico and in other places, but I think this is really the pivotal turning point. Now, thematically, we need to talk about the title of this book, because you cannot talk about the theme of this book without talking about the Angle of Repose. Not the angel, the angle. The Angle of Repose is where the soil finally settles when mine tailings that have been dropped on it from a mine finally settle down and the soil stops moving. Let me read a more technical definition, because I think I'm doing a really bad job of reading it. Angle of repose, or critical angle of repose, of a granular material is the steepest angle of descent or dip relative to the horizon plane on which the material can be piled without slumping. At this angle, the material on the slope face is on the verge of sliding. The angle of repose can be arranged from 0 to 90 degrees. And from this title, thematically, you can take grains of sand or grains of soil or whatever you want to call them. You can take all these little particles that are on the side of the mountain as kind of the author's way of talking about people through time. Grains of sand, as they get picked up by the wind or fall down a hill, eventually there's a point where they settle and they are where they're meant to be. Because the winds of change, if we take that metaphor, move people in ways they don't always expect. And people have to adapt to that change that is in front of them. And like grains of sand, we're often impacted by forces greater than ourselves. And subject-wise, this book is about the building of the West in America. And so there's talk about how do we as people go along with our lives and build the realities that we live in today, that build the regular pieces of modern civilization. And who does this work and how do they get there? Because this book is about two people, Oliver, an engineer, and Susan, an artist, who sacrifice the easy life in hopes to strike it rich. However, as part of this book, because of various very sad moments in this book, Oliver does not ever hit that extreme amount of money that honestly the West promised to him as part of his career. And because they don't become rich financially or famous in the way that either of them perhaps hoped, at the end of their lives, there's a certain amount of bitterness that they both feel towards the other person because both of them are such strong people who individually were going in different directions before they met. You see this theme of sacrifice as Susan sacrifices at the start of the book her life in the big city, her deep and close friendship with Augusta so that she can go and be married to Oliver and they can go out to the middle of nowhere. And her only connection to some of her friends or family are letters that arrive once a month or once every 2 months. And the constant promise that Susan has is that whenever they strike it rich, finally, Susan can go back to her family and friends, and they can come back as successful in their project in the West. But that moment never comes. They only get to live their lives in the West and continue. That narrative did not play out in their lives, even though the author teases it that that's a narrative that Susan really wanted to happen throughout. Yet in spite of the hardships, Susan's creative life flourishes. And the theme of creativity dominates this book because it's not only the artist who is creative and innovative, but it's also Oliver, the engineer, who is noticed by many people as an innovative and creative thinker. Both of them in their own way shape the history and the future of the West because of their connection to the people that are back in the East, which would be like the New York area. The last theme of this book is about perseverance. And this is because you really get a sense of the sheer willpower required by young couples who are living and creating the life of the American dream, especially in places where they do thankless work, very hard work, and are truly in their own way the real entrepreneurs of their time. They really struck out to the literal middle of nowhere to create value for the rest of American society. From troubles in their marriage, to the death of one of their children, to their constant financial struggles as they go to the very edge of civilization to create things, to even the narrator of the book, who is Lyman, their grandson, even he has his own troubles that are very difficult, and just getting up and going to the bathroom is nearly impossible for him as someone with a lot of disabilities. But he is adamant throughout the book that he is not going to let his disabilities get him down or prevent him from doing the kind of work he wants to do as a retired historian. And we see that perseverance matters if you're going to create a life worth living at all. And we see this best in this one quote, I think, from Lyman near the end of the book, where he talks about the relationship between the Angle of Repose and his grandparents. So here he is talking to his caregiver about what he thinks this means. "What do you mean, Angle of Repose?" she asked me when I dreamed we were talking about grandmother's life, and I finally said it was the angle at which a man or woman finally lies down. I thought when I began, and still think, that there was another angle in all those years when she was growing old and older and very old, and grandfather was matching her year for year, a separate line that did not intersect with hers. They were vertical people, they lived by pride, and it is only by the ocular illusion of perspective that they can be said to have met. Anyway, that is such a beautiful piece of writing, and it's an example of one of the many beautiful pieces of writing in this book that I think are quite fascinating. Now, onto the review. Okay, there are 2 books in this book, and I don't like one of them. The story of Lyman Ward is weird and upsetting, and it's mainly because he is a weird and upsetting person who's very deranged. Also, his wife just left him, but based on how he describes himself in the book, I can see why. I can see why. Oliver and Susan, however, their story is a huge contrast to the story of Lyman Ward. Lyman Ward is someone who's incapable and stuck and frustrated, whereas the two main characters of this book, Oliver and Susan, are creative powerhouses who seem to make the world work for them, as difficult as that world is. And they are two contrasting people who are kind of like opposites who attract. And it ends up being a tragic and beautiful love story that I honestly think is totally worth reading. And by the end of this book, I really appreciated what the story's conclusion came to. I really felt like the buildup and the slow burn of the various small moments in the book that are pieced together really tied together very well at the end. I honestly think if you like books about the Wild West and how it became something, this could be a book for you. It was great to see a perspective of what I consider to be fairly ordinary people doing extraordinary things, and in a way I really related to the characters because I could see myself in various moments in either Oliver or Susan. It's a book where you really feel you can understand the various frustrations and motivations of people in this book. Also, if you decide to, for the most part, skip the ramblings of Lyman and how mad he is about everything in this book, I don't think you'll miss very much. The only time Lyman, in my opinion, starts to make a lot of sense is near the end of the book, and that's when he falls in love with his housekeeper, the lady who's wiping his butt. And there's like a very bizarre, weird near-sex scene near the end of the book that honestly, I don't know why it's there, and I'm still kind of traumatized by it, so yeah. If you can get around the creepy old dude who tells this story, I think you could really come to like this book. Overall, it's a beautifully written book with complex storylines, and I think that this book is worth a read. Okay, that's all I want to say about this non-Angle of Repose. If you like this book, please like, share, and subscribe, and if you want to know the next time I release a new video, please hit the bell notification button. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this book, or any thoughts you have on America and the building of the Wild West. I love to hear from people who leave comments, so feel free to tell me what you thought of this book. Next time, we will be taking a dive into a very different kind of urban book in The Adventures of Augie March by Saul Bellow. I hope you're having a wonderful week and getting some excellent reading done. And as always, stay curious, stay reading.